What is the primary emotion that competes for control of your life? And what's the emotion that can take over and it can drive what you say, what you don't say, how you say it, how loudly or strongly you say it, who you say it to, and what you ultimately do? I will start by confessing mine. Well, I'll do that in a minute. Welcome back to Journey at Home, where we create content that makes it simple for you to connect with God. I am Matt, and since this will stay just between you and me, I will go ahead and tell you what my primary emotion is that competes for control of my life, if you'll keep a secret. All right, here it is. It's anger. Now, that's not always a bad thing. I'll give you an example in a minute. But it is wrong and it is destructive when I let anger creep into my relationships, when it starts to control what I say or how strongly I say something to somebody or how I treat the people around me. But even though I know that's true, I still don't like to admit when I'm angry. Can you relate to this? When somebody asks what's wrong with you, none of us love to say, "Oh, I'm just angry." I don't want to admit that, which is why when my wife asks me, "Why are you angry?" I protest very loudly. "I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated," And she's like, Matt said he's not angry, really loud. I mean, it's hard to deny, but that's what happens sometimes. This is episode 3 of our series, You Are Not the Boss of Me, and the tagline says it all: how to say no to the emotions that compete for control. Because all of us have emotions that compete for control of our mind, our mood, and our mouth. And Jesus said we better get control of all that stuff, because when something in us comes out of us and it puts us at odds with the people around us, well, it puts us at odds with God too then. And while we like to blame things outside of us for the emotions in us, Jesus pinned the problem squarely on us. He said everything that comes out of our mouth comes from our heart. So he encourages us to develop the skill of monitoring, but not just monitoring our behavior. We're all decent at that. He encourages us to learn to monitor our heart, because what's in you eventually comes out of you regardless of what you do, whether it's guilt or envy or insecurity or fear or anger. If you don't learn to say no to the emotions that compete for control, those emotions will eventually take control, and then things will quickly spiral out of control in your life. So here's a question. How do you keep anger from being the boss of you? Now, let me start by saying there is good anger and bad anger. Good anger is the anger you feel when someone else isn't getting what they deserve. So you see injustice in the world, and you're angry that so many people are dying needlessly, or you're angered by the evil you see. You decide, I got to make a difference there. A lot of good has come from good anger. Our national freedom, civil rights movement, women's suffrage, we could go on and on. They're all examples of good anger motivating people to act. But I want to talk about harmful anger. Now, you all immediately think of a person who has some type of extroverted anger when we think of this. Somebody who loses their temper and they're yelling. Or you don't want to be that or want that kind of anger to be your boss, do you? But listen, you also don't want introverted anger to be the boss of you. That is the anger that goes unseen sometimes. It's a quiet anger. You never raise your voice, you never lose your temper, but your silence is controlling. Your moodiness is destroying. People like you often don't think they have an anger issue, but the effect on the people closest to you is the same as if you're screaming at them. So whether you shove it down or you shut people down, anger is a bad boss. Which leads to the question, well, how do I break free so anger isn't the boss of me? James, the brother of Jesus, he wrote a letter to followers of Jesus in the first century where he gives us a secret. He gives us an answer to that question. It's actually really simple. And it's very powerful. He starts by asking us a question himself. He says, well, who is wise and understanding among you? Now, why would he ask that? Because wise people understand life is connected. They have insight and perspective to see things from God's point of view, so they recognize that the past and the present are going to both show up in the future. They know that all of life's connected to each other. Now, we'd all love to raise our hand and say, well, James, that's me. I'm wise and understanding. But James says, well, wait a minute. Let me give you the evidence that determines whether that's true or not. He says, if you're wise and understanding, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. In other words, James says the mark of wisdom is humility. So you can't be wise and proud at the same time, because arrogance is always foolishness. It's never wise. Arrogant people don't have a proper perspective on themselves or their place in the world. And so because of that, wisdom eludes them. But humility, well, that's a trademark of the wise. Humility requires focusing on others more than yourself, thinking about others more than yourself. It's a pretty powerful way to live, but it is not natural. According to James, here's what's natural. He says, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. So James gives us a really helpful word picture here. He says, if you let envy or selfishness or arrogance dock their boat in your heart, you've got trouble. It's not going to end well for you. You don't want those things harboring there because they're going to wreck you. You don't want that stuff influencing how you see the world or how you treat others or how you parent, how you relate to your significant other. So James says you got to be intentional not to let it harbor in your heart. And by all means, he says, don't boast about it. Don't act like you're proud of the way you are and defend it. That's just foolish. And don't go the other way, James says, and deny it's there when everybody can see it. So don't refuse to acknowledge what's obviously rattling around inside of you. That's just foolishness too. Either approach will eventually wreck you. Or the way James put it, he said, where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. That's just his way of saying what his brother Jesus had taught, that what's in you ultimately comes out of you. Wise people know that. Wise people don't deny the truth. And now that James has us thinking wisely, he gets to the heart of how to keep anger from being our boss. He says, okay, another question. What causes fights and quarrels among you? In light of how humility leads to wisdom, and a lack of humility creates disorder and selfishness, he says, okay, in light of all that, what causes all the conflicts you have in your relationships? What is the root cause of your anger? Now, when most of us think about this question, we think James asked it wrong. He should have asked, who causes fights and quarrels among us? And I know the answer to that. It is my mom. She won't mind her own business. I'm an adult. I don't need her telling me how to live my life and what time to get out of bed. I don't want her telling me how to parent my kid. Or we think it's my dad. He won't get off my back. He pushes me too hard. Or maybe it's your freshman son. Oh, he thinks he knows everything. I don't know anything. It's so ridiculous. Or it's my manager at work. He's just so annoying. She's just so demanding. So we might say, James, I know you're Jesus' brother and all, but you got this one a little wrong. It's not a what, it's a who, that causes all my quarrels. I'm frustrated with somebody out there causing this conflict. But James would say to us, actually, you're wrong. That is a lack of wisdom because it's a lack of humility. Your problem isn't a who, it's a what. And he gives us that perspective by asking another question. He says, wait a minute, don't all those fights and quarrels, don't they come from your desires at battle within you? Now, if I'm being honest, I want to say, nope, James, let me introduce you to my boss and you'll understand. Or you need to meet my husband. He used to be such a gentleman, but now if you just knew my brother, James, you wouldn't point the finger at me if I could show you. But James is going, wait a minute. Let's be wise and understanding about this. Isn't the root of all the fighting coming from inside of you? I mean, if you keep thinking the source is out there, you'll keep feeding what's ugly and destructive in here. This is the principle that can keep anger from being the boss of you. This simple idea will improve every single relationship you have, so don't miss it. Are you ready? I'm angry because I'm not getting what I want. That's a real reason for your anger every time. This is what James is trying to help us understand. You're angry because you're not getting what you want. If you got what you wanted, you wouldn't be angry, would you? You're mad because there's something not going the way you want to go. You want respect from him, and you're not getting it. You just want her to keep her room clean, but you're not getting it. You just want him to come home on time. He's not doing it. You just want her to keep her promises. You want him to spend less money. You want them to give you a fair shot. You just want him to give you credit for your ideas. So you're upset, you're frustrated, you're angry. And anybody who heard your story would say, oh, you're so right. You ought to be getting that. But the root of your anger is not out there. It's in here. To which you may go, but I think I deserve to get that. But I think I earned that. And you may be right about that, but it doesn't change the fact that you're angry because you're still not getting what you want, what you think you deserve or earned. I'm telling you, if you can pause in the middle of every conflict, if you can pause every time you feel yourself getting angry, and you can own your part of the problem, if you can just acknowledge that you're angry because you're not getting what you want, it will immediately lower the anger. So I want to ask you an odd question. What is your relationship with anger? Do you let it boss you around? Do you let it be the boss in one particular relationship? Maybe with one certain type of person? Maybe in one particular environment? People at work, they think you're the kindest person ever. Folks at home walk around on eggshells. Does anger get control of your mind? your mood, your mouth too often? And are you ready to put an end to it? Well, that's going to require some humility. It will require the humility to say, okay, it may not be all my fault, but I'm going to own my part. I'm angry because I'm not getting my way. That's how you keep it from controlling you. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. This week, when you start to feel angry, I want you to pause in the middle of the fight with your roommate or the fight with your spouse, your mom, whoever it is, and just look at them. And with humility go, you know why I'm so angry? I'm not getting what I want. Now, if you're watching this with the person today, the first one to say it's the humblest. I don't know how that works, right? They're most like Jesus. So you got to beat them to it. And if you do this, they'll be so speechless that the fight will probably be over. Even if it's not, you've just owned your part. You'll have just lowered the temperature. And your humility will keep anger from being the boss of you. Besides, for those of us who are Christians, let me remind you, we have a better boss. His name is Jesus. He did not get what he wanted, but he never chose to power up. He powered down. He laid down his rights so he could serve us. So in our relationships with one another, let's have the same attitude as Jesus has with us. Let's be wise and understanding. Let's choose humility so we can say, with all honesty, anger, you're not the boss of me. My Savior is. And every relationship you have will be better